Welcome everybody to our Quantum Computing Meetup group. Today we have Danika Hannon from Cambridge Quantum, and our moderators are Sebastian, John, Chris, and Dr. Sotelo. Please check out our next event on November 6th with Syed, our November 13th event with Chris, Dr. Sotelo, and John, and some other speakers, and December 18th with Dr. Kipa Shaki, and our sponsors are Quantum AI Foundation, Alexandria Quantum Computing Meetup, Toronto, Minnesota, OranX.net, Association Quantum, Q Mexico, Q Egypt, and Q Poland. And let me give the time to the moderators. Let them introduce themselves, and then Danika can start.
All right, so I'll go first. So I'm Christopher Bishop. I know many of you. I'm the Master of Ceremonies for Inside Quantum Technology. That's sort of my role that's germane to this meeting. I'm a nonlinear multimodal careerist. I've had 8 careers so far, including touring rock musician, opening for the Eagles in the 70s, and then 15 years at IBM working in various roles, strategy and marketing communications, but captivated by quantum a few years ago, and very excited to be here and to contribute and have this conversation with all of you. Who wants to go next? Sebastian, why don't you? You're next to my screen.
I can be next. Hello everyone. My name is Sebastian. I'm a theoretical physicist. I do also things with machine learning and data science in some banks also, but at present, I work at Warsaw School of Economics more even, and I represent Poland, people who want to introduce quantum computing and quantum mechanics for other people. So thank you. It is nice to see you all here today.
John, why don't you go? I'm just taking over here. That's the bass player. I'm the catalyst.
Keeping the time in. Hey everyone,
Exactly.
I'm John Barnes. I'm founder of Entangled Positions. So my background's in recruitment, and I spent 17 years in recruitment, but more excitingly, the last 7 of that has been in and around the quantum space. So really good to be with all you guys today, and yeah, looking forward to Danika's talk.
Deb, are you the final moderator?
No, I'm just, I'm the organizer, so I just keep track of everything else.
Okay.
So by default,
Run the show.
I'm the moderator when needed. Thank you.
Great.
Everybody knows me, I guess.
They know you. Okay.
And Raphael?
Yeah, Raphael, please introduce yourself.
I think Raphael is having some internet connectivity issues. He mentioned that at the beginning. So Raphael, we may need to come back to you towards the end if that's okay.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, perfect. Well, with that, I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen and walking through the presentation. Well, hi everyone, and thank you so much, Helen, for your opening remarks and for gathering everyone here today. I mentioned this at the beginning of the call, but I have a lot of respect for the work that the Washington Quantum Computing Meetup does, because they're constantly bringing together really interesting presentations. And thank you to our expert moderators for giving their time today. We know that we're operating across at least 3 or 4 different time zones with our moderators alone. So it's a very big deal to have everyone come together like that. And then for our audience, we owe you a huge thank you to everyone who's joined us. It's such a privilege to have you here today. And as we were watching the comments, we saw people joining us from Malaysia, from Denmark, from Germany. We have a guest from Argentina. So it's really a privilege to have such a global audience here today. And before we begin, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Danika Hannon. I work for Cambridge Quantum Computing. I am a relationship manager. So for our existing clients, I make sure that we're adding as much value as we can be. And I also do a lot of cold outreach to prospective clients that I think that our solutions could be a good fit for. And in addition to that, I'm the deputy head for the Quantum Strategy Institute, and I'm also the chair of International Quantum Strategists Day. So as an overview for our presentation, we're going to walk through the 5-year journey that I took into the quantum computing space, because it was something that was very deliberate. And as I've gone through this journey, I'm going to cover key themes and lessons that I've learned along the way that my hope is that these ideas are going to resonate with you and that you all in the audience who are seeking to pivot into quantum computing can use these learnings to go further in your own path. And then we're also going to be talking about how Cambridge Quantum's industry solutions are a big part of that journey. And we'll cover key ways that we're helping industry leaders to solve some of their most challenging problems. And throughout the entire presentation, we're going to be talking about tools that you can use. Because if there's one constant that I've noticed over the last 5 years, it's that the path into this industry isn't straightforward. And you're going to need a really big toolkit of both hard and soft skills. So we'll be talking about the kind of skills that you'll need. And throughout the presentation, Helen has been very kind and she'll be sharing links into the chat with the audience so that as I talk about some of these resources, you can actually take those and start exploring them on your own. And as one last thought on this slide, I pulled up this screenshot from the New York Times. This was an article from 3 years ago that I read. I was talking about how there's an upcoming tech talent shortage in quantum computing. So if you're out there and if you're wondering if the timing is right and if this is something that you should really be looking into, then I would encourage you to keep moving forward because the timing is right. There is definitely market need for people to come into this industry and to share their skill sets. So if you had any question about the timing and if there's a spot for you, I would say take a look at this article that was from 3 years ago saying that there's a talent shortage, and think of how much worse the talent shortage is getting now that we're 3 years out in 2021. So in looking back at the years, I started thinking about the key lessons that each one had. And in 2016, that's when I started to get very deliberate about moving into the quantum computing space. And between 2016 to 2017, the lesson or the key theme here was get curious. And before I reached 2016, there were a couple of events that were very impactful. And what's interesting about these events was that at the time, they seemed like blips on my radar. I really didn't appreciate how impactful those events were going to be. So in 2008 and 2015, there were a couple key things that happened that really spurred my journey in 2016. So to that end, in 2008, I was taking a high school physics class, and one day my teacher came in and he told our class about how he was reading a book about quantum mechanics. And this book happened to be called The Dancing Willy Masters. And he said, I can only read a little bit of this book at a time before I have to put it down and think about it, because this book is so complex, it's giving me a headache. And when he first told that to our class, I was very judgmental because I was a teenager. And I remember thinking, you're a physics teacher. This is physics. Why don't you get it? But that was kind of as far as the thought went. It was just, this is really strange. Why doesn't this expert in physics understand a book on physics? That doesn't make sense to me. But for whatever reason, the name of that book stuck with me. Fast forward 7 years later, I was working in the food and agriculture industry, and I was in a manufacturing role that was very demanding. But one of the things that was nice about that job is that before I started every shift, I got to go online and look up the news of the day and see what was happening. I happened to read a New York Times article about spooky action at a distance. And I believe that the title was something along the lines of, sorry, Einstein, spooky action is real. And it was talking about this advancement that an academic lab had made and being able to prove some of the interactions that go on between particles and some of the behavior that happens in quantum mechanics. And I'm not going to go super in depth into that, but one of the things that Einstein was very uncomfortable with during his career was the theories around quantum mechanics. So when I saw that headline and saw that there was this headline that was challenging a scientific great in a way that I had never heard before, that was really interesting. I read the headline and I just kept thinking about it. So I went on my shift and it was just buzzing in the back of my mind. If this is something that's really interesting, I'd love to learn more about this. So then in 2016, I changed careers and I moved out of the manufacturing, food and ag industry, and I moved into fintech. And when I switched jobs, I went from working about a 90-hour work week to a 40-hour work week because I was a contractor and I was capped at 40 hours. That was the most I could do. Suddenly I had all this extra time and I didn't know what to do with myself. But what I did that was really good is I went to the library and I had remembered my physics teacher's suggestion to read The Dancing Wooly Masters. And I had remembered that article from 2015 that was so interesting about quantum mechanics. So I checked out the Dancing Wooly Masters book. And when I started reading it, the exact same thing that happened to my teacher happened to me, where I could only read a little bit at a time before it got to be too much and I had to put it down. But what was really cool about that, and what I'd encourage you to try and find for yourself as you can, is that that gave me a baseline and a motivator. I realized that I loved the behavior of quantum mechanics, and I realized that while it was something that I would never truly understand, it would never be boring, and that there would constantly be more to learn about this industry. So as you're working on moving into quantum computing, the very first thing that I'd recommend doing is figuring out what you're interested in. And Helen, if you could share the first link with the group, I'd like to point you all towards Cambridge Quantum Computing's publications. Because after I started reading the Dancing Wooly Masters, I began reading journal articles about quantum mechanics and that behavior. And on Cambridge Quantum site, what they have that's really neat is they have this incredible repository of all of the scientific publications that we've put out over the years. And you can filter them by different topics. And those topics range from algorithms to machine learning to chemistry and to natural language processing. So if there's an area that you're particularly interested in, you can go out there, filter by what you really like, and then you've got this wealth of research at your hands that you can start going through, that you can start learning. And you don't need to understand everything. And I will be the first person to say that I'm going to be a constant learner in this space, and there's so much that I don't know. You're going to have to get comfortable with that. But what this does do is it puts all this real world research at your fingertips. And what's even cooler is that Cambridge Quantum is using that research to go out and solve industry problems. So again, I'd strongly encourage you to look at those papers and to find something that you're really interested in and use that as your baseline to help you move forward. So in 2016 and 2017, when I was really getting curious and forming that strong foundation for myself, as I moved into 2018, I got to a point where I was comfortable telling people that I was interested in quantum computing. So for the first 2 years, I didn't tell anyone. I think I may have told my parents and my husband that I was interested in this, but I didn't tell my boss. I didn't tell my coworkers. I kept it to myself because it was one of those things that felt so fragile that I knew that I needed to deepen my understanding of the space and strengthen my commitment to it before I told anyone about it. So that's a choice I made, was to keep it to myself. But after those 2 years, I started to feel like, you know what, this is something that I'm really serious about. I'd love to start connecting with other people who are just as passionate about it. So the theme for 2018 that I would also really encourage you to do is to start building your network. Because when you're focused on a career move, building your network is one of the single most important things that you can do to help yourself get to where you want to go. Now, I started building my network in a very unusual way, and that the very first person that I reached out to for help was my hairstylist. Because believe it or not, my hairstylist was the best networker that I have ever had the privilege of meeting. And unfortunately, he has passed away since 2018, but his name was Michael. And Michael knew everyone and he remembered everyone. So I thought, this is a long shot, but if there's anyone that I know will know someone in quantum computing, it's going to be Michael. So I said, Michael, I'm really interested about this. Do you happen to know any contacts in this space? And Michael paused. He looked at me sideways and he said, yes. Why? So I told him about my interests, and Michael said, okay, you know, that's really weird. You're the first person that's ever talked to me about this. This is still a very niche area. But I happen to have a friend who's a CTO at a tech company, and he's been focused on quantum computers for decades. Let me introduce you to him. So that introduction really kicked things off. And it was very eye-opening because that CTO was extremely generous with his guidance and his coaching. And he taught me so much about the industry landscape. So he taught me who the major players were to pay attention to. He got me thinking about, would it make more sense to go into academia or industry? If I went into academia, what kind of scholarships could I apply for? He gave me very concrete guidance and feedback about, here's where your skills are lacking, here's where you need to upskill, and here's the different routes that you could take. Not long after that, I met the co-founders of the Minnesota Quantum Computing Meetup. And at the time, I approached one of the co-founders and I said, is there anything that I can do to help you? And I want to pause and take a moment and focus on that question for our audience, because that question of, is there anything I can do to help you, is deceptively simple, yet it's very powerful. Because what you're doing when you're asking that question is you're offering your time and your skills to another person, and you're putting them first. Now, I do need to say that the majority of the time, people are going to say no. You know, over 90% of the time, people say, nope, I don't need anything. And that is absolutely fine. But the key here is that you don't know when someone's going to come back to you and say, yeah, you know, I've got a speaking opportunity. I run a meetup and I'm constantly looking for people to come give presentations. Will you talk? Or I've got an article that I could really use a second set of eyes on. Could you proofread it for me? So you can really only ask that question once, the very first meeting you're having with someone, and it's not going to pan out. Like the majority of the time, people won't need help, but do ask it because you don't know when they're going to need help. So with this, I actually got a no. You know, the co-founder that I talked to said, no, we don't need help, but I really appreciate it. It's like, okay, great. But what I did was that I started going to their events. And at the second event that I went to, at the end of the presentation they gave, they said, we need speakers. So if you know of anyone who's a good speaker, please put us in touch with them. So I thought, aha, now I know where they have a skills gap. So I went up to them and I said, hey, I'm really comfortable with cold calling. I've been networking in this space. Would you like any help with finding new speakers? And I can take that on as well as 2 or 3 other things that I think you could use a boost with. And they said yes. So that was how I became a co-organizer of the Minnesota Quantum Computing Meetup. And that leadership role marked a very big turning point in my journey, because it meant that I had to really start networking within the community, not just for myself, but with this group of 30 people who were relying on us to every month find a new speaker so that they could learn about quantum computing and so that they could further their path into the industry. And with every speaker that came through, I tried to learn something new. And there was one speaker in particular who had a very big impact. So from talking with the CTO, and his understanding of the quantum ecosystem is very focused on academia and the government, my sense is that the best path for me would be to quit my job completely, go back, earn a new bachelor's, then earn a master's, then earn a PhD. At the time, I was already approaching my late 20s, so that easily would have carried me through my 40s, which would have been a pretty tough life shift. And I was talking to that speaker and telling him about what I was thinking of. And he paused and he said, have you thought about diving in the deep end? And what he meant was, have you put any thought into, instead of quitting your job completely and completely retooling yourself, have you thought about looking at the transferable skills that you've already got, using those as a baseline, and then nights and weekends working on moving into this industry? And that was another really big pivot. So for our audience, the takeaway here is that I'd highly recommend that you spend time with people in the industry and that you take the time to learn from them. And I put in a couple of graphics here for people at Cambridge Quantum that I have so much respect and admiration for. The first one is Mark Jackson. He's our quantum evangelist, where he's all about teaching people about where quantum solutions could add value for them and about finding ways that we can approach these problems and tackle them. Mark runs the Portland Quantum Computing Meetup, and it is a fantastic group where every month he brings in interesting speakers, and he also makes himself available during the Q&A portion. So if you have a question about quantum mechanics that's really stumping you, or if you would like guidance about changes that you're seeing in the industry, go to Mark's Meetup and spend time to show up in the Q&A. Because he is one of those leaders who's really going to be able to help you go far, and he'll be able to give you those direct insights that are hard to find if you're trying to do this on your own. The second person that I would recommend paying attention to is Duncan Jones. You can connect or follow him on LinkedIn, whichever you're more comfortable with. Duncan is our head of quantum cybersecurity. And what I really like about his LinkedIn presence is that he's constantly sharing thought leadership about the threats that quantum computers pose to cybersecurity. And then he'll share the other side of the coin of, here's what we're doing at Cambridge Quantum to get ahead of that. And here's what you can do to partner with us and to solve those challenges and get ahead of that threat. So both Mark Jackson and Duncan Jones are two leaders in this space that I'd highly recommend getting connected to. Another thing that I suggest doing is being sure to match your skills to the market needs. So in 2019, I realized that I was good at networking and that I could find ways to add value for people, and I could find ways to really get to know them and see them as people. And that gave me a strong base for my soft skills, but I found out that I needed to upskill in other ways and focus more on my hard skills. So I've been looking at job postings for quantum computing positions, and I saw that a lot of them had a requirement for coding skills. And I talked to one of my mentors in the Minnesota Quantum Computing Meetup. And by that time, I had decided, quitting my job full time wasn't the best route, or at least not full time for potentially over a decade. And I had decided, aha, I'm going to become a software engineer because I need coding skills. And software engineering is the only path that I know to get coding skills. So I was talking to one of his mentors at the meetup, and I said, I'm planning on quitting work, going through a 6-month software engineering bootcamp, restarting as a software engineer. And from there, I'm going to learn the code. I'm going to learn the skills to code quantum computers, and then I'll move into the industry. And he looked at me and he said, have you thought about data science? So you notice a theme here. There's a lot of me pitching my ideas to people and people pausing and being like, yeah, but what about? And it was so interesting and funny because I didn't know data science was a field that existed, to the point where when he was telling me about it and the connections to artificial intelligence and how I would learn to write AI programs, that it sounded too good to be true. And I actually started laughing out loud because I thought he was telling me a joke. So he paused and I really was serious and I sobered up. And I started listening to him and I realized that that was a really good fit, was instead of quitting and becoming a software engineer, build on other hard skills that I have, like being a very analytical person, going into a data science bootcamp, learning how to code, understanding artificial intelligence, which is such a key component of things like quantum machine learning, and then being able to build on those skill sets nights and weekends. So this was another big shift where it felt like with every conversation that I had with someone who was an industry expert, they moved me a little bit closer to something that was a better fit for my skill sets and where I was at in life. And so for our audience, and Helen, if you could share another link with our audience, if you haven't already, what I would really encourage you to do is to look into our job postings on cambridgequantum.com. So there's a couple of things that you can do there. The first is you can start to understand what skill sets are quantum computing companies looking for. And you can also see if there's something that does appeal to you and see if there's a job opening that does match your current skill sets, even if you didn't realize that opportunity was there. So for this example, I pulled up the role of the quantum computing evangelist, which is a role that would complement Mark Jackson's, and just go through and look at that job board. And even if there's something that doesn't appeal to you right now, we do have a general job interest section, so you can still submit your resume and check back over time to see how things have changed and to see what roles change. So go out there and talk to the experts who are already where you want to be and who can help guide you there, and pay very close attention to what the marketplace is doing. And you can do that by looking at job postings. Now in 2020, what I did was I started giving back more and I focused on strengthening my craft. So I was incredibly fortunate and I got to start volunteering for Women in Quantum, as well as the quantum computing startup called Boltz AI. And they're focused on bringing quantum computing solutions to the ag space. And we're going to jump ahead a bit to 2021, but with Cambridge Quantum, I've started drawing on my past experiences to bring solutions to the marketplace. So with Women in Quantum, Boltz AI, and now Cambridge Quantum, I've drawn on things that I've learned before that can be applied to the present. For Women in Quantum, I did a lot of mentoring for a young woman who wanted to move into the quantum computing space, but maybe needed help with things like, how do I network? How do I give a presentation when I don't feel fully ready yet? How do I go out and ask for a favor in a way that doesn't come across as demanding? So teaching them those soft skills and being able to bring that coaching skill set to Women in Quantum was something that was valuable for them. For Boltz AI, I drew on the experience that I'd had from working in the food and ag industry and helped them understand where their solution would be a good fit for the marketplace. I also gave them a lot of coaching about the culture of the food and ag industry, because every industry is very unique and it's going to have different demands, and you need to be able to get insights into what they expect and what their culture is so that you can meet them where they're at and really get those conversations that are going to take you off the ground. So with Cambridge Quantum, there's a few things that we're doing lately where I've been able to draw on my past background. And Helen, here, if you could share the link to Cambridge Quantum News, that would be very helpful. So with the first thing that we're doing with Cambridge Quantum, where I've been able to bring in past skills, is we've recently done some pretty great work with quantum Monte-Carlo integration. And with quantum Monte-Carlo integration, what we're doing is you can use the Monte-Carlo algorithm to understand risk and to look at, if I were to buy these different stocks, what are the chances that it's going to go really bad and I'm going to lose money? What are the chances that this is going to be a great investment for me? So the Monte Carlo, you can analyze a bunch of different variables and you can try and understand your outcomes from that. With quantum Monte Carlo integration, what makes it better than the classical Monte Carlo algorithm is that we can analyze more variables than we can with classical computing. Now, when I was in fintech, I spent about 3 of the 5 years that I was in fintech in the compliance space. When I was in compliance, I got a very deep understanding of risk and how people respond to it, what risk is, how you define it, depending on where you're sitting, how much risk people are able to take on, what they're willing to give up. If something goes bad, how much could they give up before it's too much? So that's been really helpful with quantum Monte Carlo integration, is being able to understand the emotional side of risk and being able to connect with potential clients and understand that when they are experimenting with something new, this could have really big impacts on them. So you not only get to understand the technical side, but you can appreciate the soft skills and the soft side of what this brings. So again, drew on my compliance background to understand what we're doing in the present with Cambridge Quantum and Monte Carlo integration, and to really have that deep understanding and appreciation for risk. A second area where I've been able to draw on past skills is with the work that we're doing with optimization. And so we've recently released a lot of really good research about how we're able to solve optimization problems faster. I've included the headline about that you'll see in the Cambridge Quantum News section. When I was in the food and ag industry and I was in the manufacturing section, I really got how big of an impact small changes could have on manufacturing over time, and how if you find small ways to make improvements, they're going to have really outsized impacts. So that's been something that's been helpful with optimization, and being able to go out and look at prospective clients and be able to understand where they're at and where their needs are, and if they would be a good fit for optimization, and if this is someone that we should be reaching out to. So you never know what could be in your past that's going to be helpful for you today. Don't discount your past skills as you're thinking about making a change into this industry. And then the last thing that's been a lot of fun with Cambridge Quantum is we've recently put out new research around quantum natural language processing. So we're very much at the infancy stages of this, but we're putting out natural language processing tools that can be meaning aware and that can do new things that traditional NLP methods can't. And what's fun here is that when I did my data science boot camp, I specialized in NLP. So as I think about the potential for QNLP, this is something that I'm really excited about. And what I've started doing is putting together a list of prospective clients that might be interested in this too. And that's because I went through that specialization where I learned about all these different NLP methods and all these different use cases. So I'm able to look ahead and think about QNLP and think, aha, if we were to look at this industry, here's a really good use case for QNLP. By the way, I happen to find this LinkedIn profile where this person's saying that they're very focused on NLP. Let's reach out and have a conversation with them, knowing that we're not at a point where we can do a proof of concept now, but we can start growing that relationship so that when we are ready to bring this solution to the marketplace fully, we're going to have people who are ready to use it, who are really excited about it, and who understand the value. So a great way that you can start to really hone your skills and to not only build on your current talents that you're growing, but also pull in your old talents is to give back. So volunteering is a fantastic way to do that. And it led me to a point where I was able to put those skills to use for Cambridge Quantum. Now we hit 2021, and this is probably the most humbling lesson of all of them. And that is, you're going to have to learn how to start over. So in February of this year, I joined Cambridge Quantum, but the interview process actually started back in 2020 when a gentleman at Cambridge Quantum reached out and he said that he had a role that I thought he'd be a good fit for. And it turns out what had happened was that he'd seen the work that I'd done for Boltz AI and for Women in Quantum, and he saw transferable skills that I didn't recognize. And so I was able to join Cambridge Quantum and pull in those transferable skills with the relationship management piece work on building those relationships with current clients, do a lot of cold outreach to prospective clients, and make that pivot. But now that I'm here, what I've realized is that I'm back at square one. So this is an industry where you're going to constantly be learning every week, sometimes every day. There are new announcements about technological breakthroughs. At conferences, you'll notice that the pool of speakers is slowly growing and that we're starting to see more people from the consumer side join the stage and talk about what they're doing to solve problems with quantum computing. So you're going to need to get very comfortable starting over. And when you hit your goal of joining an industry, whether that's volunteering for an organization that you have a lot of respect for, creating your own startup, or maybe contributing to research or participating in a boot camp, it's a funny thing, but what you think is the ending is really going to turn out to be a very big beginning. So get comfortable starting all over again, embrace that beginner's mindset, and then do stay very receptive to new opportunities. And I have one last thing to share with this slide. Over the summer, I was approached by Brian Lenahan from the Quantum Strategy Institute, and he asked if I'd be open to taking on a role with this group. And to share insight here, the Quantum Strategy Institute is an international think tank where what we're doing is we're furthering the understanding of practical applications of quantum computing, and we're helping industries to bridge the gap between where there's potential for quantum computing to have an impact and where it could really have the most value for them right now. So within my role in QSI, I get to help us build relationships and make sure that our teams are singularly focused yet collaborative. So that draws on those skills that I've built up of pivoting through industries, learning new things, really understanding how people and problem sets fit together. So the lesson for 2021 is stay receptive to new opportunities and embrace the beginner's mindset. Now for connecting. If you would like to reach out, you're more than welcome to connect with me directly via email at danika.hannon@cambridgequantum.com. Deb, at the beginning, you had a question about sponsorship, so I will connect with you on that personally. But if you're someone who has a more general question, or if you have a career-oriented question and you'd like to reach out to HR, you can reach out to info@cambridgequantum.com and also careers@cambridgequantum.com. And then for the Quantum Strategy Institute, we are very active on LinkedIn. So I'd really encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn as well as to follow Cambridge Quantum. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I do believe that we have some questions that have been pre-prepared for our moderators.
Sebastian, go ahead.
There was first question of which school of quantum mechanics you like the most, the French or the German? Maybe. Wow. Maybe you can answer it.
You know what? So we did have questions prepared for the moderators. I'd love to start there, and Chris is our first moderator up. But real quick, I will say, in terms of which field of quantum mechanics, I haven't aligned with a particular field yet. I know I have a mentor who loved the French side. To be fair, he was born in France, so I feel like he's obligated to love that most of all. But when I was starting this journey and looking at going into experimental or theoretical side of physics, I realized that the experimental was the best fit because it was very hands-on. So when I was looking at the academic route, experimental was what I was looking at. Chris, would you like to start with our questions?
Sure. First of all, Danika, that was terrific. Thanks so much. And I think what you're saying resonates certainly with me and with a lot of people who've come to quantum, to your point, from different disciplines, different backgrounds, different roles or whatever. So thanks so much. It was great. A question for you, as you think about the future of quantum computing, the industry writ large, what are you the most excited about? Where do you think the major impact will be?
I'm really excited about the human side of quantum computing. So I am very much a people person. And as I think about the impact that these technologies are going to have on daily lives, it's pretty astounding. The one that is the most personal to me is right now, Cambridge Quantum has partnered with a bio-life sciences company where we're helping them look at how they can use biomarkers to deliver more effective treatments to cancer patients. Wow. I remember when I was a kid, my grandma really struggled with cancer and she beat it. She won. She did an amazing job. But I have memories of visiting my grandma in the hospital and bringing her stuffed animals and then fortunately getting them back every time she came home. But I think about the impact that things like more effective cancer treatments are going to have on future generations and how there's a possibility that there's going to be some kid out there in the future that instead of having memories of visiting their grandma in the hospital, they could be spending that time at a park or reading a book together on the couch. So as I think about these technologies and what I'm most excited about, it's really once we get these tools into place, once we get this stuff off the ground, how is this going to impact our quality of lives?
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I mean, the potential impact is sort of mind-boggling, especially thinking about where we are, say, with COVID, right? And imagine applying quantum, just to follow on that thread, right, to dealing with the next pandemic, finding a vaccine maybe in 10 minutes, or finding a cure, or, developing the Moderna pill in half an hour. I mean, I'm making it up, but I mean, the potential power of quantum to address biomedical challenges is fantastic. So thank you for that. Chief Dr. Sotelo, is he connected? I see you're muted. Can you hear us?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Hello.
Hi, do you have a question for Danika?
Yes, Danika, thank you very much for your presentation. Very nice to have you at the meetup today. And I have an initial question is going to industry challenges. What do you think is the single most important action we can take to solve industry challenges with quantum computing?
That's a fantastic question. Thank you, Raphael. So I think one of the biggest challenges we have right now is making sure that we're really understanding consumer demands. So with Cambridge Quantum, what we'll do is we are science-led and enterprise-driven. So we'll build out these solutions where we know that we can get practical technology and tools into place with the tools that we have right now. And then we'll go out into the marketplace and we'll look for where we can find a good fit for those. So Cambridge Quantum is very in tune to the marketplace, which is fantastic. With the Quantum Strategy Institute, so to complement that, with the Quantum Strategy Institute, one of the things that we're doing is we're going out and we're interviewing consumers who could be using quantum computing. And we're getting a good understanding of where is this a good fit and where is it not. So a nice example of that is with manufacturing. There's a lot of industry analysis out there saying that manufacturing is going to be a great fit for optimization in quantum computing. And that's right to an extent. So to share some insight there, with Cambridge Quantum, we've done fantastic work with this company called Nippon Steel out in Japan, where they have thousands of unique types of steel. So for them, optimization makes a lot of sense because their production is incredibly complex. But for where I came from with the food and ag industry, where our number of products was in the dozens, that's maybe not the best fit. So I think that as a whole, it'd be really good to keep focusing on what are the solutions that we can bring to market right now so that we can keep getting those short-term impacts that are going to build up to really long-term change? And then also, how can we make sure that we're listening very closely to the consumer environment so that we can start having more nuanced conversations? And instead of saying, as an umbrella, quantum computing is going to be good for manufacturing, we can start to tease that out more. And we can say, for advanced manufacturing, or maybe manufacturing where they're using a lot of IoT, or maybe something where it's very critical to the nation's infrastructure. So you need to have quantum cybersecurity solutions in place to guard it from hackers. So I think that the best thing that we can do is think about what can we achieve in the short term to meet market demands, and also let's go out and make sure that we're being responsible producers and talking to those consumers and being very thoughtful of what they're saying. And one last note on the Quantum Strategy Institute, we are going to be taking all those insights that we're gaining from interviews, and we're going to be sharing them with the public in white papers and articles. So we will be sharing those insights with everyone as we go on.
Thank you, Danika. You mentioned a car manufacturer and applications in the industry. We can see another car manufacturer, which is BMW. These days have had a quantum challenge. Is ongoing, so many people is participating. So it's another example. So it's a good idea to stay close to the potential customers. And I have another question for you, which is more personal. You have talked about your personal experience during these past years, and how you get to the field. And well, if you had, my question is now, what would you do now if you would have more time available for you I mean, you talk about your plans for 2021. What are you going to do in next year? And especially now, if you have more time a week, say a couple of hours more time a week.
Yeah, what I would do is I would start reading through Cambridge Quantum's archives of publications, because I've noticed something really interesting lately happening with customer conversations, where we'll be talking to a prospective client about the different solutions we have, and they'll say, okay, that's interesting, that's valuable, but are you doing anything over here? I'll take the question back to my scientists. And there have been a couple times now where I've asked them, this major banking firm is really interested in fraud detection. Do we have anything that could help meet that? And they've said, yeah, actually we published a paper about anomaly detection, and that would be a really good way for us to detect fraud. So one thing that I would love to do in the coming year is go back and read through those archives, because there's more solutions that we have in the archive that I think could really meet those industry demands. But because I don't know about them, I can't bring them up in client conversations yet. So it's something that I really need to focus on in the coming year, is understanding more of the depth of Cambridge Quantum solutions, because there's more good information that can be mined to meet current market needs.
So we just go around the horn. Thank you, Danika. John, do you have a question you want to pose to Danika?
And first of all, fantastic talk, Danika. There's a lot of things to take from that, but I think for those in the audience, there's a couple of things I think that are really valuable. The first is having that, not just an ability, but an appetite to start over again. Go to the bottom of the stairs and climb again, and experience new things. And I think as well that the aspects of giving back, because I think we've all got things we can give back, but equally within the quantum ecosystem, there's a lot of other people prepared to give back to you. So that's valuable, whether you're part of the fabric of quantum or you're just starting your journey. So certainly I would echo those comments, and moving on to the questions. So putting my recruiter hat on, one of the things that's fundamental and yet often overlooked, particularly when I'm speaking to people looking for roles, are what their goals and aspirations are, what makes them happy. And I'd really like to know what it is about your role and what roles should I say, because there's multiple positions, but what it is you really love about them, what gets you out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, John, I wish I could say that as the type of person that just jumped out of bed every morning. I am definitely a slow riser. It takes at least 10 minutes, sometimes 30 to get out of bed. So embarrassing confession there. Chris, I see you raising your hand, you too. But once I get out of that sleep fog, what gets me started is I really love connecting with people. So on Cambridge Quantum side, it's such a joy to be able to talk with prospective clients and getting ready for those calls, doing that market intelligence and figuring out what motivates this person. Are they focused on innovation? Can we help them drive new innovation for the company in some unexpected and really valuable ways? For Quantum Strategy Institute, it's looking at how can we broaden the ecosystem? How can we help more companies enter the space and to lower some of those barriers to entry? Because even for me, for someone who's been working on getting into the space for 5 years and has now worked in it for 9 months, it is still very confusing. So for me to be going through that, I know that it must be incredibly intimidating for people who are hearing about quantum computing. They're seeing these headlines that they need to be paying attention to it, but they don't necessarily know where to start. So the joy is getting to connect with people, whether that's at Cambridge Quantum and getting to understand how we can best serve our audience, or with QSI and helping to pull more people into this ecosystem and broaden the industry.
And you always make your role look and sound so easy, but I suspect it's almost like the swan, that everything's serene on the top, but the feet are sort of paddling away underneath. So what's the biggest or most rewarding challenges that you have with the different roles that you're involved with?
Yeah, so this is a lesson that's going to be applicable to everyone. Whether you are wanting to move into the industry, whether you have another goal and you showed up today because you're curious, you're going to face a lot of rejection. So my role for business development with Cambridge Quantum, I'm in sales. I do a ton of cold outreach every week, and it is good to get a 20% reply rate. That's genuinely, that's good. There's some reply rates where you can expect to only get 1%. So that's good. But that means that 8 of the 10 people that I reach out to are never going to respond. And that's okay. And that's something where I can handle that now, because when I was going through those first 2 years, 2016, 2017, they were lonely and they were really tough, feeling like kind of constantly feeling like I was way in over my head, that I was dumb because I wasn't getting this stuff. So the most challenging thing that you're going to face if you move into this industry is that there's going to be a lot of rejection. Make sure that you have your safeguards. So if you have someone who just always is wonderful to talk to, maybe make sure that you schedule a call with them at the end of the week so that you have a pick me up to look forward to. Or switch to a topic that you know really well so that you can step back into that role of mastery and you get to feel like you're the champion again. But the most challenging part is you're going to face a lot of rejection. Although when someone does respond to you, or when you do get that learning breakthrough, there's no better feeling in the world.
Right. So I would just jump in and say, Danika, to follow on that thread, I mean, these are early days, right? I've heard people describe what we're doing now with quantum is similar to wandering around in the Pleistocene wilderness as hunters and gatherers. I mean, the state that quantum is in, which makes it very exciting, but also very challenging, certainly for someone in your role. I mean, for all of us really, but in biz dev is like, there are people who say that current quantum computers, don't really deliver much value yet. But I think the key is, you've got to start now. You've got to get engaged now, because if you wait until it's really viable, till there are error-corrected machines with 1 million qubits, it's going to be too late. So that's why it's so exciting and interesting to be in this space now, right? But challenging for someone in your role for sure. I mean, I give you credit. Yikes.
Thank you so much for your feedback, Chris.
Yeah. So Sebastian, let's go to you. Do you have a question you'd like to pose to Danika?
I want to ask you, Danika, what are the most important things you would still like to accomplish this year? If you can say us.
Absolutely. Sebastian, with the Quantum Strategy Institute, we launched about a month ago, and we have had just incredible reception by the community. And there has been such an outpouring of support. And we've seen that there's really a strong need for people who can walk that middle ground of the technical and the business side. And where we're at now is we've realized that we need volunteers. We need people who can pitch in and who can help. So we are actually looking to fill 3 volunteer roles right now. And if you're someone who's interested in that, please reach out to inquiries@quantumstrategyinstitute.com. Again, that's inquiries@quantumstrategyinstitute.com. And you'll be reaching out to me because I'm going to manage that mailbox. We're looking for someone who can take on a policy administrator role. And so someone who can craft policies that are going to help guide the culture of the Quantum Strategy Institute and where our future direction goes. That's something that's really important. And it's very rare to be able to have a strong influence on strong cultural influence on an organization. So this is a very neat opportunity to take on that leadership role, put your strategic and far-thinking skills to use, and help us develop our policies. The second role we're looking to fill is someone who has great marketing skills. So we know that there are a lot of very complex challenges and technologies that are being used in the quantum computing space. And it is a big challenge to be able to translate them in a way that is understandable and engaging to the business community. So if you're someone who really likes to think about difficult concepts and how to convey them in a meaningful way, we'd love to have you on board. And then the last role is someone who would be working very closely with me. So if you're someone who really enjoys getting to understand how to work with different people, how to add value for them, and how to find ways to connect people together so that we can spark innovation and do things like host this meetup. We're able to bring together this wonderful group of moderators and hosts and audience attendees. Then please reach out, because we have bitten off a little bit more than we can chew. And we would love your help with guiding the future of this organization.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think that this is very nice time to, if you could repeat how we can get in touch with you and with Quantum Cambridge team. or even with Quantum Strategy Institute? Because there are a lot of questions about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're getting in touch with me, I am on LinkedIn constantly. I should probably be on there a little bit less, but I check LinkedIn multiple times a day. And so you're more than welcome to connect on LinkedIn, and please feel free to send a message and reach out if you'd like to connect. I really do love getting to learn about people and learn more about their journeys and where they're going. So for me personally, LinkedIn is the best way to get in touch. Then for the Cambridge Quantum team, I shared my email address earlier. Again, that's danica.hannon@Cambridge Quantum. So if you have a question specific to one of the technologies that I talked about or one of the solutions or how we work with clients, I'm more than happy to help you with that. And I can connect you to the right person who could take the conversation further if I'm not the best person to shepherd it to the end. Then with the Quantum Strategy Institute, we're also very active on LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn page for Quantum Strategy Institute. If you like surfing the web, we've got a great website that Mihaela Bricia and Ian Mason did a fantastic job of setting up, and that's at quantumstrategyinstitute.com.
So Danica, before we get into Q&A in the chat, and there's some really interesting questions, I'd sort of like to end with a futuristic, look in the crystal ball kind of question, right? So for you, again, you're uniquely positioned, I think, to answer this kind of question, but what do you think the future of the quantum industry is, and what are the challenges that you see ahead? I would say also, what the benefits are. We talked a little bit about sort of biomed applications, but taking a step back even more, the 50,000-foot view around, what might lie ahead.
So, Chris, what I'm really excited for, and this might sound a little bit funny, but I'm excited for that point where quantum computing becomes normal. And where it's something that we don't even think about, like there's so many things that I take for granted that my washing machine does a great job of washing my clothes, whatever I need. And it's been reliable for 6 years. And I don't think at all about all the hard work that went into that. And I am excited for the day where quantum computing is just very normal. And because if we hit that point, it means that we're going to have overcome so many hurdles, like you were talking about earlier with error correction, with the scaling up of the technology, with connecting to the business community, and really getting to a point where we can talk well between both the business and the technology side. So that's what I'm the most excited about. Did that help answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. So again, I spent 15 years at IBM. We used to say a similar kind of thing, like when you plug in your toaster, you don't care where the electricity comes from. Same kind of thing. If you're solving some kind of problem using technology, using a computer or whatever the interface might be in 5 years or 10 years or 50 years, that there's a certain level of transparency about how the problem gets solved. I think that's a fantastic answer. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So let's field some questions from the chat, right?
Okay, Danica, I have a small question that
yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Please.
But,
Please go ahead.
I didn't hear anything from CQC. Is there any plan for teaching and training, students or workers from different disciplines? Do you have anything specific from CQC?
Yeah, so I believe that that's something that we're exploring. To your point, Deb, we don't have we have the publications. Those are very scientific. We have the news page where it does a nice job of talking about the scientific and the business value of what we're doing. We have a ticket. We recently released that as a software development kit. So I believe it's open source now, which is really phenomenal. It's also free to use, so anyone's welcome to download that. We have a lot of really good self-serve resources out there. And while I believe that we are making plans to do more engagement with the community, in the meantime, I would recommend that you check out Mark Jackson's Portland Quantum Computing Meetup, because from time to time, he will talk about our solutions and the best ways to use them. So definitely keep your eyes on his YouTube page, and you can also go back and you can look at past talks that he's given to understand the value of our solutions and how you can start working with them.
Yeah, I visited a couple of them. Yeah, I know Mark. He came to here also. So, okay, thank you.
Great. So I just wanted to point out in the chat, there's some interesting conversations going on. One is Team Orion X posted a link to their November 13th meeting. So I'd encourage everyone in the chat to check that out. Also, Robert had asked about the 3 volunteer areas that the Quantum Strategy Institute is looking for, and those are in the chat as well in case you want to reach for Danika and team and help them with their important work. We have a question from Anu saying, most of the quantum computing adoptions are still restricted to proof of concept. So how do you see revenue growth from both a customer and solution provider perspective? Good question.
That's a fantastic question. So first, moderators, I know that all of you have incredible experiences. Would any of you like to take a stab at addressing that question first?
Yeah, well, I think if I might join in, I think there's the first thing I'd say, there's lots of different ways to revenue streams. So, for example, laser manufacturers have been making revenue from quantum activities. Companies like D-Wave have been making revenue. Recruitment has made revenue from quantum. So, but I think generally speaking, the main areas that a lot of people are focusing on, that comes when quantum company, and this kind of relates to Danika's prediction of the future. It relates to when quantum companies interact with, for want of a better term, classic industries. So, for example, taking CQC as an example, as their products spread out across traditional industries, find real world or traditional world applications, that's when I think revenue streams will really start scaling quite quickly. You know, they are at the moment, but it's from a small base. But as that continues, that exponential growth becomes really powerful. And I think, you know, we've all seen these growths on COVID curves and charts and things like that. But hopefully with quantum, it's not going to be something that you see these spikes going up in trepidation. It's going to be something we're all looking for. And as that becomes more normalized, and maybe people aren't so, or don't have to be quite as aware of what the state of the qubit is, it becomes normal. When the operating system that CQC and HQS plan, when things like that come into play, and you don't know what's doing the heavy lifting, that's where the revenue streams will really look to spur on and become a major industry within their own rights.
That was a fantastic answer, John. I don't have anything to add to that. I think that was wonderful.
Well, so I just would follow on, John. That's a great perspective. And sort of tying back to one of your earlier points, Danika, is that with all due respect, while quantum computing gets most of the press and the limelight, there are lots of other ways to get involved in quantum. I mean, John describing the laser and photonics and testing and metrology industries related to quantum. You know, I've heard it compared to Levi Strauss selling picks and shovels to the miners in the California gold rush, right? He's the one who made the money. I mean, he did very well. He's still, you know, the company's still in business. Here we are 150 years later. But the idea is, as Danika was saying early on, the Richard Feynman quote, paraphrasing, right? Find what you're passionate about, find what you're interested in. It doesn't necessarily have to be spintronics or particle physics. It could be something tied to quantum sensors, could be tied to quantum networking, tied to quantum cryptography. I recently did a podcast with Eddie Zervigon, who's the CEO of Quantum Exchange, and they actually don't hire any physicists. They hire crypto security experts to help them figure out how to achieve crypto agility using quantum solutions. So all by way of saying, there's a lot of different ways to get involved, and all chasing revenue growth for sure, to Anush's question, but there are lots of different ways to sort of deal with this challenge. So, Anush, hope that answers your question. Anyone else want to weigh in?
Just to follow on from Chris's point as well about finding that thing you're interested in, is as the sort of second quantum revolution develops, there'll be more and more applications that can be used for. And as quantum mechanics is the fundamental underpinning of the universe, pretty much there will be an application for everything you care about, whether that's conservation, whether it's you know, agriculture and feeding the world, or making money, or whatever it is that you're passionate about. There is almost certainly going to be some sort of application for that. How long that will take is slightly different, but it's almost certain that will follow at some point. So that's also worth bearing in mind, just from your own personal journey. which may be governed by revenue streams as well.
So here's another question from Dev. Based on your interviews and market analysis, where do you find QC versus AI adoption currently? And so to follow on, which departments show most interest? I know there's a big Google AI quantum practice area, right? So where do you think Cambridge Quantum Computing is in that space? I know Bob Koch is working on some of that with you guys. And
Yeah, right now, quantum computing adoption is lagging AI. And what we're finding that's very interesting is that AI may almost be a prerequisite to quantum computing. And this is something that I've just started putting thought into within the last week or two, but we're going to be doing a deep dive into this with the Quantum Strategy Institute. So Deb, in the next year, we're going to be putting out more research about this. But one of the things that I've been finding is that if a company has successfully adopted AI, which is a big challenge in and of itself, then their chances of being open to quantum computing are higher than that of a company that is not ready for AI yet. I think probably why that is because with just AI adoption, you've got change management. You have to focus on your education of how do you get a workforce that can use these tools effectively and in a way that's relevant for you. So if they've been able to tackle all the hard stuff that goes into AI, they're going to be in a much better position to be able to focus on quantum computing. And I think that answers the first part of the question, but I believe that there was a second part that I could use a refresher.
Yeah, so Dev was asking about which departments show most interest. I think that's always interesting. Like,
yeah, absolutely. So in terms of departments, I'd say it's varied, but the thing that unites all of them is that they have a problem where they've been wanting to tackle it for a long time, and I haven't had the compute power to do that. So that seems to be where we get the most excitement. You'll find these groups, and they're really cool. They're few and far between, but just every once in a while, I'll have a call where I'll reach out to one person and send them a meeting invite for. It's a Monday, and I send them a meeting invite for Thursday. And then between Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I start getting more pings of so-and-so accepted the invite. And I realize that's what's happening is that the meeting organizer is forwarding that meeting invite to other people within their company who I didn't realize are interested in quantum computing, but who are really enthusiastic about this. So it's rare, but there are these internal champions at companies who are looking around, they're thinking, man, my life would be so much easier if I could solve this problem. And I happen to think that quantum computing is a really good fit, and here's why. And it is such a joy to be able to connect with those people because they are the ones who also straddle the business and the technological aspects of it. And they realize that this is something that would be valuable for them. And if we're extremely fortunate, this is the first vendor that they've had contact with. So, the departments that want this tend to be varied, but the common thread is that all of them have this itch to solve something that they haven't been able to yet, and they see quantum as a potential path forward.
Yeah. So do you see, again, not to get too granular, but I'm wondering about like functional areas, like is legal interested, is manufacturing more interested? Certainly anywhere where there's a lot of data that they want to capture and crunch and rationalize and leverage, right? Consumer marketing, maybe, strategy teams building out plan years, approaches to whatever the business, drives the business model at a meta level. Any of that bubbling up, or is it vary company by company, or any patterns you're seeing from where you sit?
It varies company by company, but to your point about legal, that brought to mind a couple of thoughts. So first, now that Honeywell has gone public with Honeywell Quantum Solutions, I have a story to share there real quick. Okay. I was talking to one of the team leaders at Honeywell Quantum Solutions, and I was asking him, how did you keep this hidden for so many years? Because it's not easy to be working on some of the most advanced technology in the world and to not let anyone breathe the word about it, but for several years. And he started laughing and he said, we hid ourselves in legal. So from an organizational chart standpoint, they were all under legal and their budget was all under legal. And he said, no one looks at legal.
That's interesting. Wow.
Yeah. So one of the most advanced hardware manufacturers in the world started in legal.
That's so kept all the quantum in the sort of funded by the legal department, whatever, so they could really manage communication around it and risk. Oh, that's really interesting. Wow.
So people tend to have this perception that legal is a quiet area. And I think that story really challenges that notion. And added to that, On the Quantum Strategy Institute, we have a gentleman named Bert Kaminsky. He is on our board of directors, and he is a lawyer with Google Tech. And what Bert has done is in the last week or so, he was on this podcast called Legal Matters, and he was talking about the impact that he sees of quantum computing having on legal space. Now, this is something that we should be paying more attention to, because we've seen with the tech industry how it started out as very unregulated, but now we're getting to a point where regulations are definitely starting to catch up in a big way. And from my time in compliance and from listening to Bert, my sense is that we're going to see that with quantum computing too. So, overall, it's very varied, but don't discount the importance of legal, because not only did Honeywell
Really?
Quantum Solutions come out of that, we have Bert Kaminsky saying this is something we need to be paying attention to.
Yeah. Well, again, just not to beat the proverbial dead horse, but to your point, Danika, I mean, regulatory and policy conversations are important, increasingly important, and potential roles for people interested in getting involved in quantum. So legal and quantum, I mean, disciplines that maybe have not been connected historically are now connecting in new and interesting ways and representing career and job opportunities. So just wanted to make that point, right? Here's a question from Anna Kett. Do you have your in-house quantum computer at CQC, or do you only provide software by way of developing new algorithms?
So we develop algorithms, and we are connected to many of the major hardware providers. We have a great relationship with Honeywell. We're very close with IBM. We've been fortunate we get to work with IonQ and AQT. So we work with a number of hardware providers in this space. And what we'll do is we'll work on developing algorithms that are the best fit for the consumer and the problem that they're looking at. And then we'll run them on multiple types of quantum computers so that we can figure out which type of quantum computer is going to give their algorithm the best performance. And we can really help the business start to understand that landscape of, for your specific problem, here's the algorithm that's the best fit, and then here's the hardware that's the best fit for you. So while CQ focuses pretty heavily on the software and we don't actually build any quantum computers ourselves, we have very deep relationships in this space that we're fortunate to be able to work with.
So you then point them to sort of hardware providers based on the business problem they're trying to solve and tied to the algorithms that would help them solve that problem?
Yeah, absolutely. So we pay a lot of attention to how can we be better meeting the industry needs by making algorithms that will help people solve some of their most pressing problems.
Yeah. So interesting question from LA saying, can you talk about how quantum is being used in consumer companies? Like I heard Covestro is developing chemical formula using QC to simulate recyclable foams. Any other examples from companies like Campbell's Soup, Illumina, et cetera?
Yeah, so moderators, I'd actually love to open this question up to you.
Yeah.
So I know that all of you pay very close attention to the industry. What are some things that you've seen that you're excited about?
Who wants to go? Raphael, you're unmuted.
Yes, I just talking about consumer technology and quantum. I just want to notice that I am with IEEE Consumer Technology Society, and we are setting up a committee on quantum technologies. So anyone interested in applications on quantum to consumer technologies, please feel free to contact me to join this committee, which is about to being set up in the coming months. Okay.
Fantastic.
So,
Raphael, can you put an email address or a link in the, or maybe Mihaela has that information? That's very exciting. Wow.
Yes. I
Please.
think I can imagine, for example, for consumer technology, for example, for advertising, recommender systems, for example, there is a field in which we use extremely large models with extremely large matrices and calculus with extremely large matrices because of large amount of users and profiles and so on. So I think that, for example, is a field. The other one is the one mentioned by LA in his question. So I will put my email. Okay.
Great.
It's an IEEE. Thank you,
Yes,
Chris.
thank you. Very exciting. I look forward to learning more about that. work. Here's a question from Diego, near and dear to my heart, about education, right? So the question is, we all read and hear about future applications of QC, all problems it may solve in the future. My question is about education on QC. Many years ago, we were discussing all great things that machine learning and AI would do for us, and now there are tons of courses on both out there. How do you see the future of QC when it comes to educating individuals on it? And
take a first pass at that question, but then John, I'd love to hear your perspective.
yeah, I'd love to hear John's take too.
Yeah,
He's
because
closer
John,
to it
you
than most
are.
of us, right?
So from my perspective, in terms of education with the Quantum Strategy Institute, that's another thing that we're looking into. And we do have Matthew Versace, he leads our education pillar. And so the Quantum Strategy Institute, over the coming months, we are going to be working on helping people understand what kind of educational materials are a good fit, what you should pursue if you want to get where. But John, you work with us every day in terms of your recruiting capacity and working with employers. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so the first thing I'd say with that is that there's many different layers to education. So we're working at the moment in an industry where there's been a lot of education from academia. There's a heavy contingent of PhDs and postdocs. We're seeing more masters and bachelors educated people that are coming in with skills that are useful for the quantum industry. But then I think as well, there's also, so if I take back to my first sort of steps working within quantum 7 years ago, as someone who wasn't a scientist, I found there was a huge gap between the sort of peer-reviewed white papers and the public press, which was generally wrong. That middle ground is starting to fill up. So there's accessible books and papers around how quantum and business are interacting. There are also, something that I think is really interesting is actually projects around quantum natives. And what I mean by that is we're going to have the generation that are maybe very young at the moment, sort of toddlers, 4 or 5 year olds. Well, sooner or later, people that age are going to be born into a quantum-ready world. So there's a lot of thought around, actually, it's going to be easier for a 3, 4, 5 year old to accept things like entanglement and superposition, because you read fairy tales where someone can be in 2 places at once. Well, it can happen in real life. So and there's a few projects that I'm sort of touching on that take this approach and are really looking to expand there. I think as well that perhaps as conversations around quantum become more commonplace and more people have the effects of quantum or an understanding of it reaching out to them in their home, then perhaps school courses will be more, physics courses will have a larger component of quantum within them. There's also groups like Community, QSI is another one, who are providing really good educational resources. So if you take Community and Anisha Musti, she's or the group is actually one of the challenges they're looking to address is that some of removing some of the barriers, and some of these are simple is probably the wrong word, but they're challenges that have been overcome before. So a lot of the literature is written in English. Well, if it can be translated into 100, 200 different languages, how that can reach so many more people that have got real value to offer to the quantum community and receive from the quantum community. So it's a really multi-layered question. I could sort of speak about it all day, but hopefully there's some of the sort of themes that may spark a little bit of thought in people's minds.
And thank you, John. And I just put a link in the chat to Quantumapalooza. I don't know how many of you know about that, but that's a tremendous resource for free quantum educational materials that Terrell France at Harrisburg University monitors and manages. Really cool. We should put a link for Community as well in here. I'll dig that up and post it. Any other questions from the attendees, participants? Don't be shy. I have some here, but feel free to post them in the in the chat, or just turn on your mic and share.
So could I ask one more question?
Yes, please.
Hi, Danika, by the way, very nice talk. Thank you, Danika. You really gave a very nice bird's eye view of the industry, and moderators, you're really doing it's a great job. My pleasure being here. So I was wondering, because there are lots of players in this field, right? And different people are pursuing different types of, for example, different types of algorithms. So I'm not really sure, but the kind of papers that you shared in the Quantum CQC news channel, news webpage, I could see that at least those algorithms are based on, like, gate-based quantum computing. So are you doing something with quantum annealing technology, or are you just focused on gate-based quantum computing? And while comparing these two types of technologies, like this gate-based is most famous with Google, and annealing is with D-Wave, sorry. So I was wondering, like, which one of these two should one focus on, or like, which one do you see to be the more prominent one?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. I personally would encourage you to look at gate-based computers. My understanding is that Cambridge Quantum has partnered with hardware providers that are all gate-based, because that's where we see the most long-term potential. So to your point, I have so much respect for the work that D-Wave has done. They have been pioneers in this space for an incredibly long time, and they have done so much with their annealers. An interesting shift is that I do believe that in the last couple of weeks or so, in their latest roadmap, they announced that they're going to start building a gate-based quantum computer. What I think that signals is that they see, now they're at a point where they see more long-term potential in gate-based computers over annealers. And my understanding is that annealers are very good at optimization problems, but that they are maybe not quite as effective with running different types of problems that are outside of the optimization area. So again, I have such a tremendous amount of respect for the work that D-Wave has done. They have truly been pioneers in this space. With Cambridge Quantum, though, we are focused on the gate-based hardware because I believe it's something that we see more long-term potential in. Chris or John, do either of you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There are lots of options. Needless to say, here, this is my cheat sheet. If I hold this up for everybody to see, I keep this close to me at all times. It's sort of, what the options are in terms of qubits, right, and global hardware companies. So just to follow on, I mean, certainly there are lots of options. I think gate, it seems to be the winning solution, although they're, cold atoms. I mean, cold quanta is looking at different approaches. I would say you should focus at a more meta level, right, around what kind of use cases are being developed and what kind of business problems are being solved. Because, I think of the AC versus DC conversation at the end of the, 20th century or 19th century, really. What kind of electricity are we going to use? So ultimately, there'll be some rationalization, standardization, and it may be that certain kinds of qubit solutions will work better in certain settings. I mean, we don't know, right? But maybe superconducting will be appropriate for problem X or use case Y, whereas, gate-based will be more broadly accepted. I mean, Betamax versus VHS. It's, we've seen these movies before, these kinds of conflicts where technologies vie for viability, and they don't all go away, but some get adopted in different settings. And so, and back to the, follow your passion. Like, what are you interested in? What do you find intriguing? What's interesting to you? And go in that direction, right? Make sense?
Yeah,
Thank you.
That was a great question, Danika. Thank you so much. John, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think just to sort of echo those comments. I mean, first of all, I'd hope, harking back to the AC versus DC, no one needs to electrocute an elephant to prove their technology.
Please, yeah.
That's one thing I'd like to.
It's a great movie. What is that movie?
Not to do. But I remember when I was sort of first learning about the different technologies. And over the years, you've sort of seen that everyone's putting their money on superconducting, and then photons, and then ion trapping or atom trapping or annealing. And over the years, they've kind of gone in and out of fashion a little bit. But I've had a long-standing view that, and I could be totally wrong. I have been before, but just my sort of two pence worth or 2 cents worth, depending on where you see me. I suspect that there may be, to echo Chris's views, that there might be multiple winners of the race. So annealers, for example, fantastic with optimization problems. You might have a room temperature photonic system that sits on a trader's desk. You might have these, super powerful a superconducting system that sits in the cloud for researchers to use. And all of these different technologies will find their own niche. And actually, it may come to the stage where, with the right operating systems and APIs and so on, that actually you don't actually know what technology is doing what behind the scenes. You just know that it works. Harking back to the toaster or the washing machine, you get nice toast and clean clothes, or the analogy of those in computing terms. And actually, it's less important to the user where that comes from, and you'll have integration along the way that just makes that, from your perspective as a user, that just makes it work. Your screen gives you what you want, and the answer pops up. So I don't know that it's necessarily totally adversarial, and that there's only one person left standing in the ring at the end of it. There could be lots of different applications, and that's without mentioning things like topological qubits. And as I think, as quantum computers become more powerful, and they then are able to develop the materials to make future quantum computers, I suspect there'll be other manifestations that we don't even know. And look at how working with diamonds was used, then it kind of went out of fashion. Now we're seeing it a lot more, particularly with sensing and things like that. So I think there's a lot of serendipity that will come into play as well. And there's things that we can't even see or understand now that will become crucial to the sort of the race to get huge logical qubit counts that are really effective.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I just want to add on to one of my mantras is, you don't have to be a particle physicist to work in quantum, right? So as John is proving, and as Danika is proving, and as I'm proving, just saying, there's a whole constellation of adjacent and ancillary disciplines where we, the quantum community, need people with skills and passion to drive understanding and adoption of this technology. Yeah. Right? You're going to need business development people like Danika. You're going to need recruiters like John. You're going to need moderators and evangelists like me. You're going to need authors like Brian Lenahan. I mean, on and on. Educators. We just talked about the education work stream, right? It's the discipline that enables all other disciplines at the end of the day, right? So I want to encourage our participants to keep that in mind, right? That there's lots of ways to get involved and lots of skills that are needed in the quantum space. So one more question, Danika. So Audrey wants to know, with quantum chips in development, quantum processing units, right, QPUs, how will your company adapt? Like, how are you addressing this multifaceted approach?
So Audrey, that is a great question. And I think that what we're trying to do is keep very close relationships with our hardware providers, because what's so neat about having these advancements going on in both hardware and software at the same time is that as one side gets better, the other side can use that. So my sense is that our scientific teams work very closely with the scientific teams of the different hardware providers to understand what's happening on their side, so that we can anticipate, ooh, you've had a breakthrough? Well, let's try running this again and see what happens now versus what happened last time. So my sense is that we do have a very close relationship with them. And I know from myself and from my team members, we're all subscribed to multiple newsletters. So, at least once a week, we'll ping out to each other, hey, this just happened over here. Pay attention to it because it's really important. And so, Audrey, you're absolutely right. There is a lot of movement going on there. And the way that we keep close tabs on it is we help support each other and make sure that we all are aware of the most important advancements going on lately. And then we think really critically about how is a leapfrog over there going to impact us over here.
Thank you. Yes, I know Harvard and Princeton are already developing the chips, so I was interested in how you were going to mitigate that based off of the gates.
Yeah, and that would be a fantastic question for a more technical team. So Mark Jackson would be a great person to get in touch with that. I'd encourage you to reach out to him or to try and catch one of his next meetups.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'd connect with him.
So I want to invite Helen to come back and kind of close us out, maybe just wrap it up. Thank everybody for joining, but hand the ball back to Helen to just say thanks to everyone for joining. Helen, are you there? There she is.
Yes, actually, you can stay. The Zoom is reserved for 2 hours and 45 minutes. So if you want to have something to discuss with Dr. Sotelo, Chris, John, and Sebastian, please feel free to do so.
There was one thing that I've just seen a question coming from Faye that I think relates back to some of what we discussed before. So Faye's question, do you see value in obtaining a PhD in the long run? What kind of things can a PhD do that others find difficult? And I would just refer that back to parts of the conversation that we discussed earlier, where it's about working out what you want to do and what you're interested in. So within a PhD, you can choose your learning curve to a certain extent more than you can do in industry. That said, there are a lot of people in industry that see industrial experience as trumping a PhD. So first things first, I would take a step back from that and look at what you want to do and how that manifests itself with a PhD or an industrial role, and also what industrial roles are open to you to join into. Then you can start looking at what the career development, training programs, on-the-job learning, what you can learn from the people you work with. So if there's a CEO or a line manager who is doing exactly what you're interested in. So I would probably take a step back from looking at that as a binary question, and really sort of get underneath the bonnet or the hood, depending on where you're sitting, but really look at the details of it. Don't just sort of take a binary approach to it. Have some real insight and look deeply into that, and work out where you want to go, and then kind of work back on that to see the path to take towards that.
John, thank you. I'm going to jump in and let Danika go. Danika, thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation. Your opening presentation was very enlightening and inspiring, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, everyone. It was really a privilege to be able to speak with you all, and I look forward to keeping in touch. Bye.
Thank you, Danika.
Thank you.
Danika.
Thanks, Danika. Brilliant as always.
So I was going to ask a question.
Yeah.
Where do you see quantum computing going with simulating protein folding?
I saw that question. So, so I'll jump in. I think there's certainly big focus on it because it can, quantum computing can, in theory, model complex molecules at a level that a classical computer cannot do, right? So I know that there are companies that are investigating it. Polaris QC, do you know that company? Shahar Kainan, she's the CEO. They're looking at applications of quantum in pharma. I'll see if I can pull up the URL for her site. She's going to be at our Inside Quantum Technology event, actually taking place the first week in November. A little plug for that. If any of you are interested, we're doing a 5-day, everything you always want to know about quantum, but we're afraid to ask. That's what I'm calling it. But it's going to be a wide-ranging set of conversations around quantum information science and policy and use cases and end user applications and quantum supremacy. We have a bunch of interesting speakers. So does that answer your question? I mean, it's going on, right? Certainly, it's one of the top areas where people are interested in applying quantum computing.
Okay.
Tim,
Yeah,
let me see if I can pull up this website of Shakar.
Yeah, I was asking about protein folding because that's actually what I did my PhD in physics on, was protein folding, the simulations for protein folding.
Cool. So are you looking for an opportunity to work in that space, or?
Yes. yeah, to program quantum computers for protein folding, or to program quantum computers for a lot of different applications. It doesn't have to be necessarily protein folding. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tim, what do you program in on your quantum computer? What language do you use currently? Is it Python or?
I use Python and mainly the modules Qiskit and Circ. Although I want to learn Q#.
Yeah, Q# is what everyone's learning right now. It's the #1 language. I mean, it's like C#, but better, obviously. I want to connect with you because I think I might have something that could be of value for you in a research group at Georgetown.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I have a professor that's actually working on what you're interested in.
So Tim, put your email in the chat, please, right? Or your LinkedIn profile or both. And I just put in, Tim, a link to Polaris QB, which is Shahar Khanon's company. And her opening statement here is, Polaris QB is using the most advanced technology to create drugs to fight diseases that have plagued humans for millennia. We're uniting the three sciences, physics, quantum computing, biology, genetics, and chemistry, molecular drugs to create our designs, build a unique IP portfolio, and change the way new drugs are developed. I'm proud to be part of the Polaris QB team and our vision. So she's someone I would encourage you to connect with on LinkedIn. And I'm sure she could give you more insight into what she's doing and what the broader applications are
And
for
then
quantum in pharma, right?
what is her name?
Her name is Shahar Khanon. If you look in the chat, I put a link to her sort of profile on her company's website. Polaris QB is her company. Do you see it in the chat?
Okay. Yeah, I see it.
From a market perspective, that's something that certain companies are reaching out to us with DNA sequencing and the like. We're seeing, and obviously this is anecdotal from what we're seeing in the market, what people are contacting us regarding, but we are seeing some companies that are sort of going through funding rounds, some of them sort of second stage funding, that are on the right path. They're looking to sort of take the next steps to take it to looking more at real world applications. So I certainly think it's a growing area, and I think it's one of the things that quantum computing has always been looked at to offer real benefit at a near term. Quite what that looks like, I'm not a scientist myself, so I can talk more about what companies are reaching out to us for and what the market trends are, as opposed to the actually getting in the lab and doing it ourselves. No one lets me play with the lasers or write algorithms.
Oh, bummer.
And Audrey, with my photonics hat on, I totally agree what you were saying about before as well. So
yeah, that would be good. Hey, Tim, I'm reaching for you on LinkedIn, just FYI. I think Audrey, you and I are connected.
We are from our last meetup. You inspired me to create a LinkedIn, actually.
Well, good.
I didn't really have one. That's why everything's brand new. And then John, I reached out to him from this, and Sebastian as well, because you said connect with everybody that you meet on these chats. And you had one, it was a couple months ago, about emerging technology right before the New York quantum event.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, so I did it. And I've reached out, I try to connect as much as I can in my field. And it's been wonderful. I've gotten great responses, and I've learned a lot more from different, seminars and groups that I would never even know about otherwise. So
yeah.
Thank you. Inspirational, well, you are.
Well,
I know you probably hear this all the time, but you really are.
No, I don't.
Or maybe not enough.
Yeah, you're very kind to say so. And the follow on is, to everyone in the meeting, reach for me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with you. Let's, again, the broader this community is, the better, right? The more people who are connected and with different skill sets and different backgrounds and different passions, the faster we'll get to what Danika was describing, like benefit for humans, right? I'm just saying. That's That's how it works.
I'm just popping my LinkedIn in the chat as well and echo those comments. And also, Audrey, the groups of mine that you've joined on LinkedIn as well, feel free to network around those and reach out to people. That's a big part of what they were created for.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's what Chris said, the 3 pillars, you know, network, find what you want to do. And yeah, so I've been following everything that you said, and it's been wonderful. So
yeah, I spent years building those groups, so hopefully find some good value from them.
thank you.
Yeah. So and I just put my LinkedIn link in the chat as well. So again, people, please reach out. I'm happy to connect. Let's do it. Any other questions, comments? Are people aware of the QEDC, by the way? I just sort of dropped that in. Yeah, Quantum Economic Development Consortium. Sort of back to Audrey's comment about, funding and focus from the government, right? The public sector perspective. That's a great organization. If you're not aware of it, I would encourage you to check it out. They have a cool website. Actually, I just brought it up. We put it in the chat. It's a consortium of, just the Reader's Digest summary, of 150 or so organizations funded by the Department of Commerce. Large companies, small companies, academic institutions, IBM is involved, University of Chicago, the National Network of Laboratories. They're working on quantum network at Fermi and Argonne, University of Chicago. So I'd say at the very least, check out their website just to learn more about what's going on from a sort of meta perspective in the US. And if you're interested, you or your organization, can apply to join. It's US only. Sorry, John, at this point, although there's a great organization in the UK as well. But anyone on the call who has a company or an organization in the US and is interested in quantum, you should definitely check it out. I'm going to dig up the URL here and put it in the chat.
Thank you. I was about to ask you for that. Thanks.
Yeah, because they do really is, and I just became an official member like last week, whatever. They accepted my application as an individual, since it's just me.
Because I was on I don't know if you're familiar, the University of Maryland actually has a supercomputer, and they just did a investment summit a week ago, and that was very informative.
Yeah, did you go to that?
I did, yes. I'm in the
Cool.
DC area. It was really cool. So Strange
Yeah.
Works, it was amazing. So
Yeah,
it's really
so
interesting to see how much money is being dumped into these industries, and they don't really have anything yet. It's not really tangible, and that's what they're saying. They're like, you're hyping it up so much. If they don't deliver, then what's the repercussions of this?
right. Yeah, no, I heard that was great. The president of IQT, right, where I work or contracted, is Lawrence Gassman. He was there, and he was saying, really, it was an incredible conversation. I just put the QEDC link in the chat. Make sure that works. It's ridiculously long. I'm not sure why, but did that take you to the page? Somebody check. Yeah. So cool stuff, interesting stuff. And again, a unique connection to public sector, right? To the government, to what the US, what the White House is doing, both in terms of policy and funding. So I encourage you, if you're interested, back to the policy and regulatory conversation, if that's your bailiwick, certainly you should know about the QEDC, right? So, yeah. Other questions, comments? We still have 42 people. Boy, we got a committed group here. Holy cow, on a Saturday afternoon, man. Kudos to the quantum addicts.
I also include the White House link as well.
Oh, yeah, there's
I did direct. Sorry, I need to do everyone. So the government actually has everything laid out on their government site too, which is very helpful.
Yes, great. Thank you.
Interested.
Audrey, yeah, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot going on. And as you say, a lot of money, I mean, from both, investment, but from governments and all over the world, really. I mean, like in the Netherlands, didn't they just give Q-Tech like $625 million or euros, I guess. It's like, wow, we're like, can we help you spend some of that? I got some ideas about what you might do with that.
I think as well.
They're scrambling to figure out, again, Hardy, to your point, like there's nothing really, I mean, some of the more strident critiques are like, NIST computers don't do anything useful. Let's be candid. I mean, we're
Not at
years
all.
away from like,
We're
something
like at
that's-
least 5 years out.
yeah,
But
but you
what
gotta,
China was able to do with the teleportation of atoms into space, I don't know if you guys have read or anybody has read that study yet.
so
it's
Audrey, tell us
incredible.
about it. I sort of skimmed it, but since that's your area of expertise, please share with us what was that? What exactly did they do?
So what you can do is kind of what the government wants to use for F-35s. You're able to transmit, it's a teleportation of atoms, but you need photons. Photons can't carry memory, atoms can. So I mean, physics, Tim could probably come in on this as well. So what they want to do is they want to be able to do that into an optics. So they've already laid out this entire plan to build an infrastructure to be able to do photonic. It's integrated photonics is kind of what I explained to John, what I'm interested in as well. I think that's going to be, that will set off kind of like the .com, like what you said before, Chris, at our last meeting. This is almost like a .com. Everyone doesn't know what they're doing. They're scrambling. They're all trying to do and know everything about it, but you don't really know where it is until here we are. Now it's happening. We have Apple, we have Google, you don't hear about Nokia or, Nexus phones anymore with the walkie-talkie. It's outdated technology, but at that time it was, and that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think we are behind as a country right now, and I think we're just trying to catch up with the funding.
So is the photonics thing, is that satellite to satellite or satellite to Earth station or both or
So
none of those or
teleportation? What it is, if you take, so you have a photon, an exact replica is made elsewhere through entanglement, but the original has to necessarily be destroyed.
But you also have to tone down the noise, and you have to understand error correction, which we haven't secured error correction, so we can't really monetize it. You can't guarantee.
Yeah, we should dig up that article and put the URL in the chat, right? Shall I? Because that's
just coming back to some of the themes here. I'd like to introduce Yogi in a second, but just coming back to some of the themes to try and sort of draw them together from. We were talking about the potential quantum winter that could come into play if hype isn't managed. But I think also mentioning the different nations, I think quantum nationalism is a real threat as well. If people if you look at the EU, for example, they close the doors to certain research projects with Israel, Iceland, the UK. I see talks about the US, what China's doing, China, what the US is doing. And actually, that's something that I think we need to retract from at the moment. We often talk about it being at a pre-competition stage. And if people put the shutters up and just work on what they want and keep it to themselves, it stifles creativity, it stifles innovation. And that's something as a community we can try to help. Obviously, as individuals, we're limited, but as groups like this, to put that topic on the agenda is something we could, and for my money, we should all be looking to do, because the potential a lot of the potential could be lost by trying to have it's almost like you want to have the whole pie, but the pie's smaller. Why not have a slice of a much bigger pie where everyone's fed more? So that's my sort of 2 cents on it.
no,
and
that's right.
Yogi's had his hand up for quite some time as well. So
hey, it's John. So like we were talking about the national initiatives, right? So Government of Canada this year announced like $400 million, and there's also national defense and armed forces quantum strategy in place. Next week we are having a workshop to decide where we're going to invest that in.
So wait, so Boniface, I'm interrupting you. So that's not AFRL, that's something else, or?
No, that's totally different.
Wow.
Well, Government of Canada.
Oh, this is of Canada. Okay. Yeah. Well, can we sign up and join you, or?
For the workshop, no, that's only for Department of Defense and the Canadian Armed Forces.
Okay. Cool. Wow.
And then we have another program called the Quantum Computing Application challenge program. So, and I shared the link there. So that's for anybody
okay.
to come in and solve some challenges, work with the government agency. So in the past, we wait for the technology to mature and then the government goes and buy. But this time we decided to flip the script and say, we're going to build it together with the industry.
Great.
So
Wow.
next fiscal year, by the 31st of March, we're going to find out how the money is going to be split, who's going to invest, or who's going to get the piece of it, and things like that. It's happening.
Very good. So Boniface, can you put a link or two in the chat? Like, is there a news article about that, or a press release or something, that just so we can all be smarter about it?
Yeah, sure. I'll put both the quantum strategy and also the program. So there's two right now at the moment.
Great.
We'll start to see more, and the 30th of November, we're going to have the Government of Canada White how these programs going to come in. So
Cool.
it's happening.
Are you at Waterloo? Where are you? Where do you sit?
Oh, I'm in Ottawa.
Ottawa, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. Wow. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem. So it's like we want to grow the Canadian ecosystem, and also there's a government, British Columbia government set up some fund to improve the workforce, quantum workforce by 2025. So that's also coming down.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, any of those links you can put in the chat, please, to make us all smarter. I mean, the more we know about what's going on. I know there's a lot at Waterloo. Burnaby, there's, D-Wave is, right? Burnaby. So that's Canadian focus. Yeah, it's cool. But yeah, I'd love to learn more about that.
Yeah, Xandu's here, like a lot of great companies and a lot of great researchers too. So
yeah. Any other questions? Then we're kind of coming to the end of the hour here, at the end of the 2 hours. Well, I know that the government of Quebec is going to be participating in Inside Quantum Technology, our event that starts November 1st. And they have in the past, and I think they're sponsoring a section of it again this time. So
just on that topic of the Canadian ecosystem, as Yogi mentioned, there's some really good investment. I think Canada was also one of the early movers within quantum. So we're seeing different governments sort of come to the table later, and I think that there's spending $1 now or spending $1 5 years ago, you'd have to spend significantly more now for the same effect. And I was speaking when Germany put the €2 billion stimulus earlier this year, speaking to people, some of the people thought the biggest challenge would be finding people to spend the money on, which that doesn't last long. Don't worry, that doesn't last long. But we coming back to the Canadian side of things, we actually work with people in the Canadian ecosystem who are able to provide really innovative funding models for potential founders, business models, funding models. So if there's anyone out there with the next big idea, but maybe doesn't have the funding or the business skills, there's a few entities we work with both in Canada and elsewhere that we may be able to introduce you to.
So Helen, do you want to take the reins and conclude? I think it's a great conversation.
Sure, please feel free to join our November 13th event with Chris, John, Dr. Sotelo, and some other panelists. Thank you. And Dr. Kushal, do you have something to say?
No, I just want to thank you all, and and for the great discussions and all. So looking forward to hear from everybody again. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you, Helen. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody, for the chance to be part of this.